Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Kristel Candelario? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Kristel Candelario was born on September 11, 1991, and lived in Cleveland, Ohio. She worked at an elementary school as a building substitute. Kristel lived with her parents and children in a house on the 3100 block of West 97th Street. In 2021, she had a daughter named Jaylene. This was not her only child. According to Kristel's neighbors, in August of 2022, she asked them to watch Jaylene for a weekend, and they agreed. Instead of being gone just a few days, Kristel was gone for 6 weeks. Other neighbors said that Kristel often left Jaylene alone in the house. Despite these problems, Children and Family Services had never been involved with Kristel. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On Friday, June 16, 2023, at about 8 a.m., Kristel Candelario found her 16-month-old daughter, Jaylene, unresponsive and not breathing in the family house. She called 911. First responders arrived and found Jaylene extremely dehydrated. She was pronounced dead at the scene. There were no signs of trauma. The playpen where she was found had blankets and a liner in it. The authorities reported that these items were saturated with urine and feces. Jaylene's cause of death was starvation and severe dehydration. Kristel confessed to the police that she left for a vacation to Detroit, Michigan, and Puerto Rico 10 days earlier on June 6. Her daughter was alone in the house for this entire time. Normally, Kristel's mother and father watched Jaylene, but they were both in Ecuador with Kristel's oldest daughter. One of Kristel's attorneys would later imply that Kristel became overwhelmed with the responsibility of watching her daughter and decided she needed a vacation. On June 18, 2023, Kristel was arrested and charged with a few offenses, including aggravated murder. On February 22, 2024, 32-year-old Kristel Candelario pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and child endangerment. As part of her plea agreement, the state dismissed 2 counts of murder and 1 count of felonious assault. Kristel's sentencing is scheduled for March 18, 2024. She is facing up to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. Kristel had no prior felony convictions before pleading guilty in this case. Referring to Kristel, one of her attorneys said, quote, "She has taken responsibility for what she did, and she is remorseful. There will be mitigating issues that come up at sentencing that we will address. Hopefully, people will realize that she is not the monster that some see her as." Unquote. Kristel's defense argued that she had depression, but would not offer any more information about her mental health symptoms. If Kristel possessed a viable defense based on mental health, one would think that her attorneys would have introduced evidence supporting this theory during the guilt phase. For instance, they would have taken the case to trial and argued that Kristel was not guilty by reason of insanity. Mitigating factors, of course, can be introduced at the sentencing phase, and this is common, but why not try to avoid a conviction in the first place? Again, this makes it seem as though Kristel did not have a good insanity defense, and she was lucky to get the plea deal her attorneys negotiated. This brings me to item number 2. There were many obstacles to Kristel effectively arguing that she was not guilty by reason of insanity. Here are just a few examples. Even if Kristel was overwhelmed, she had many options other than leaving her daughter alone in the house. She could have called emergency services or otherwise sought mental health care. She could have simply stayed in the house and coped with her feelings, or she could have contacted her neighbors. Several neighbors indicated they would have watched Jaylene if Kristel had only reached out to them. Kristel had a habit of leaving her daughter alone. Undoubtedly, she received negative feedback based on this behavior and knew it was morally unacceptable and dangerous. Kristel appeared to be highly functional. She worked in an elementary school, and she went on a 10-day vacation. Taking an extended vacation requires completing a variety of tasks, and is inconsistent with being overwhelmed. 3 days into her vacation, she posted an image on social media of her standing on a beach in Puerto Rico. She was smiling and appeared to be having a good time. The caption read, quote, "The time that is enjoyed is the true time lived," unquote. Another image that she posted featured her standing in front of 2 Star Wars droid statues, specifically BB-8 and R2-D2. She was smiling and wearing a Mandalorian shirt. Kristel did not appear to be in distress on her trip. Item number 3. The murder that Kristel committed is referred to as a maternal filicide. The risk factors for this crime include being under 35, possessing a marital status of single, struggling with financial difficulties, having a low educational level, being socially isolated, possessing low intelligence, and having a history of mental disorders like depression, personality pathology, and psychosis. This crime is often divided into 5 types. The first type is called fatal maltreatment. This is when the mother kills through negligence or violence but did not intend to cause death. A common precipitant for this type is persistent crying. Severe head trauma is the most common cause of death with this type. The second type is the unwanted child motive. This is where the mother conceptualizes the victim as an obstacle to her goals. For example, maybe she has a desire to spend more time with friends, but can't because she has to take care of her child. The resentment leads to a homicidal outcome. The third type is altruistic. This is when the mother commits the crime out of love, believing that death is in the best interest of the victim. The fourth type is psychotic. Here the mother has broken from reality and there is no comprehensible motive. The crime is motivated by delusions and/or hallucinations. Perhaps the mother believes that she is being commanded to murder by aliens, ghosts, government agents, or celebrities. The fifth and final type is partner revenge. This is where the mother commits the crime to cause emotional damage to the father. In almost every instance, this occurs in the context of a custody dispute or infidelity. Item number 4. When reflecting on Kristel's case, in light of the 5 types, I think that 3 of the types can be eliminated. Kristel was not altruistic or psychotic, and no partner was involved, so partner revenge does not seem likely. This only leaves fatal maltreatment and the idea that Kristel's daughter was unwanted. I think Kristel's crime may have been a combination of these 2 types. Kristel was so arrogant, selfish, and had such a pronounced sense of entitlement that she would not allow herself to be restricted in any way. Her daughter was perceived as some type of obstacle to living life to the fullest, but Kristel did not necessarily intend to cause her death by going on vacation. It's almost as if Kristel just assumed that everything would magically work out for the best, like she would return home and her daughter would be fine. Maybe somebody else would have jumped in to save Jaylene. If Kristel had intended on committing murder, why did she call 911 upon her return? She could have easily disposed of Jaylene's body and cleaned up the crime scene. It's clear that no one considered Jaylene to be missing at that point. At least that would have given Kristel a chance of avoiding prison. By calling 911, she guaranteed herself a long sentence. Item number 5. Could depression explain Kristel's behavior? Depression and associated symptoms like psychosis can sometimes be used to explain antisocial behavior, but in this case, there isn't any evidence of these conditions. Her defense attorneys will probably introduce something in an effort to convince a judge that Kristel was depressed and maybe even psychotic, but based on what's available right now, there is no reason to believe that she was. I think the best that Kristel can hope for is receiving a sentence that features the possibility of parole. Maybe her attorneys can argue that this was just an extreme case of narcissism. Kristel was so focused on her own pleasure that she was unable to fully understand the consequences of her behavior. From her perspective, the world disappeared and she was the only person that mattered. This strategy is a long shot, but it's probably the best defense she has. Realistically, her behavior is functionally indefensible. Now moving to my final item, number 6. Based on the available evidence, what would justice look like in this case? I think that life in prison without the possibility of parole is an appropriate sentence in this case. Even after Kristel left on vacation, she could have called emergency services and they would have saved her daughter. She had a lot of time to contemplate her behavior and chose to let her daughter suffer a horrific death alone in that house. In order to commit that crime and enjoy a vacation simultaneously, Kristel must have possessed a frightening level of sadism and callousness, a level which is inconsistent with being free in a peaceful society. Those are my thoughts on the case of Kristel Candelario. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.